Welcome to Content and Conversations, the podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners that want to prioritize connection and relationship as the primary tool to drive sales. Content and conversations are the two most powerful tools you have to attract the most amazing clients, build solid relationships, and sell more stuff. From sales, marketing, energy, and mindset, we'll discuss everything you need to hit your goals, make more money, and have more fun in your business. Let's go.
All right. Hello and welcome back to Content and Conversations, where we are going to talk about reach and frequency when it comes to your sales and marketing strategy. So random fun fact, if you didn't know, I actually started my sales career, basically selling radio advertising in Orlando, Florida in 2005. I worked for a legacy top 40 station. It's still there. They're still top 40. It's just the wildest thing in the world. They're now iHeartRadio, but it was Clear Channel. But that was ultimately my entree into sales. So, I tell you guys, I have 15 years of corporate sales experience. I started selling radio advertising at the age of 21. I actually started as a sales assistant, making $10.10 an hour as assisting the sales team, and then eventually rolled into a sales, or what they now call an account executive role. So completely on accident stumbled into sales. And at the time, there was really no formal training process, right? We got a lot of product knowledge, but didn't get a lot of sales training. Like, this is back in the day when not everybody even had a computer on their desk. It was just a matter of, there was a computer room, and it was a wild time. But anyway, I digress. So that is how I started in sales, right? Like a ton of cold calling, pulling doors. I was the youngest woman on an all-woman sales staff. And it was just so much fun. I did a ton of bar business. My early 20s were very, very, very fun. I had a great time. But ultimately, what is important to you in this conversation is the concept of reach and frequency. So when we were selling radio advertising, that was the conversation that we were having with our clients, was about reach and frequency. Because when you sold radio advertising, how you put together campaigns was how many people are we going to reach? And then how often are we going to reach them? And ultimately, we decided whether or not, or how to run a campaign based on that. How many people are you going to reach? Are they the right people at the right time? And then how often are they actually going to hear the message? Because if you did not have a large enough budget for people to hear the message enough times, you just ultimately weren't a fit for radio advertising. So that was literally how it was sold on the concept of reach and frequency. And there's all these really cool tools. And I'm sure they're just extraordinary now, right? With these tools, that we could say, hey, this is how many people are listening to this morning show, and this is how many spots or commercials that you would need to run to make sure that people hear your commercial often enough to be compelled into action. Why am I telling you this? Why is this important to you? Because that concept has not changed, right? There are an abundance of more places and opportunities to get in front of people now, but there really is not. The whole concept of marketing and sales and advertising and all the things isn't really different. Like, are we reaching the right people? Are we reaching enough people? And are we reaching them frequently enough to actually compel them into action? And I honestly think that is the challenge that most business owners have, right? Like, yeah, sometimes we have some messaging issues and sometimes we're not speaking to the right problems. But if it really boil it down to just pure activity, most people aren't taking enough action, right? Their reach and frequency is not there. So they are not seeing results from their marketing. This is why we hear over and over again from people that, well, I was marketing on Facebook and it didn't work, or I did an outreach campaign and it didn't work. And then when I really dig into the numbers and I dig into the data behind it, the reason that it didn't work is because the reach and frequency wasn't there, right? Either we weren't reaching enough people or we weren't reaching them frequently enough for them to move forward. But this is what creates an epidemic of people that say, I tried this and it didn't work, and I tried that and it didn't work. And, again, there's a million different factors, but at its most basic level, when we put together campaigns for our done for you and our partner clients inside of our agency, is we're looking for reach and frequency. Are we reaching enough people? So for most people, depending on where you are in your business building journey, if you're a newer entrepreneur or newer to business, or you have a smaller audience, your number one activity is audience building. You need more people to see your message, because if you only have, if you have a very small audience, and the way algorithms work and everything on social media, you have this small audience and they're just not seeing it frequently enough for it to be effective. And so your job then at that point in the game is to grow the audience so that you have a large enough pool of people, a large enough pond to fish in, if you will. Because for many of us, our pond isn't big enough to fish in to actually hit our income goals, right? So whether this is your social media following, whether this is your email list, people in your Facebook group, people who follow you on Instagram, people listening to your podcast, people watching your YouTube, right? Like, if you do not have a large enough pool to fish in, that has got to be your number one priority, is growing your audience, because you need to start with reach, right? So you can frequency, your face off, right? You can post a shit ton of content, but if the reach isn't there, then you're dead in the water, right? It doesn't matter how often, you're going to actually wind up burning your audience out, or getting, just people becoming blind to the messaging because you're just selling to the same people or talking to the same people over and over and over again. So if you have a small, and I'm not saying you cannot make some money from a small audience, right? Like you can absolutely positively get to the 6-figure mark with a very small audience. You can just go out into the world, shake hands, meet people, sign clients. So, but for those of you that your goal is hundreds of thousands and millions, right? And you're still in the early stage of business, your number one priority is going to be audience growth, right? But then from there, it becomes the frequency game. And this is something that has changed. And it's funny, I posted a TikTok very recently that, I hate putting this out into the world because, my opinion is subject to change, because 3 years ago, I would have given you a different prescription of frequency, right? At the time, attention was easier to get. Algorithms work differently, fewer social media channels. You didn't need to be as present on social media 3 years ago as you do today. Again, if your intention is to get into hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in your business, right? It is important that you are showing up frequently enough for people to see you. So again, people come to me and they're like, well, I'm showing up on social media. And I go and look and their last post was 8 days ago. That is not showing up on social media, my friends, right? And again, we're excessive. I understand content creation is literally what I do for a living, but I'm posting 6 to 8 times every single day on my primary platform, which is Facebook. And then we post 2 to 3 times a day on TikTok. And then we cross post on Instagram. I post a lot of content, and a lot of people are like, oh my God, how do you do it? I'm like, it's really freaking easy. I know my ideal client inside and out. I know what's in their head. I know the challenges they're having. I know what's keeping them up at night. I know why they're not having the success that they have. So like the client, it just literally pours at me. And I understand it doesn't work that way for everybody, but really for me, it's about reach and frequency. So every single day we are growing our audience, and we do this through Connect Chat, which is our social media prospecting tool. I have a team member who handles that for me. We are consistently friend requesting new people every single day on Facebook, adding new people to our ecosystem every single day. And then I am posting 6 to 8 times a day. So we're adding those new people, and then we're constantly updating our message in a way where I have people tell me all the time that, oh my God, Ryan, I see you on social media all the time. Oh my God, like you're all I see. Oh my gosh, how do you do that? And that's the point, right? Like this is literally like, you think of like why everybody in the world knows Target and Starbucks and all the big brands, right? We know them because they're marketing, right? We know Apple because of their marketing, right? Because we see it frequently enough that we're like, oh, okay, I know exactly what that is. So it is our job as business owners to build sales and marketing strategies that have the reach and then they have the frequency. So now that's just talking about content marketing. Or social media content. Let's talk about email, right? The number one resistance that I get from most people is like, I don't want to email my list too much. I don't want to be annoying. And my thought process to that is, first of all, the volume, again, the frequency of which somebody has to see your name to even be remotely close to interesting is pretty significant, and if they don't like it, they can leave. Right? Like you're so worried about not annoying your audience, but then you're not talking to them enough to sell anything. So you didn't annoy anybody, but you also didn't sell anything. Right? Like which one do you want? Do you want people who are annoyed by hearing from you too frequently to actually unsubscribe because they were probably never going to buy anything anyway? Or do you want the people who are actually want to hear from you and are excited to hear from you frequently enough for you to compel them forward, right? So this whole, I don't want to email my list, I don't want to be annoying is like, cool, you don't have to be annoying, but you're probably not going to sell anything anyway because a once a month email newsletter is just not going to cut it. Your raving fans will love it, but for like new people, they're like, who is this person? Why? Like I have in my promotions folder on Gmail, I have so many people that like, I don't know who the hell they are. Like I obviously opted into their list, right? Clearly I downloaded a freebie or something. Like I chose to be there, but I don't hear from them frequently enough to know who they are. The people who are in my inbox every day or at least once a week or multiple times a week, I at least know who they are. Even if I don't open their emails, I know who they are and I know what they do, right? We used to call this becoming known before you're needed, right? So am I in the market for what a lot of these people do? Probably not. Frankly, most of the people I get emails from, it was really just me funnel hacking anyway, like wanting to see what their email content was, what their messaging was, what they were selling, what their offers were. But, at the end of the day, I know who they are simply by seeing their name in my inbox. I don't even have to open the email. And that is what we call, again, reach and frequency. I've seen that name enough. I know who that person is. The stranger danger is gone. We've now created familiarity. Familiarity is what gets us to sales, right? We very infrequently buy from people we're not familiar with. Right? We buy from people we're familiar with. How do we create familiarity? Reach and frequency, right? Let's talk about DMs. Let's talk about outbound campaigns. Let's talk about social selling, right? The number of people who will message 10 people on social media one time and then tell me, Ryan, I ran an outbound campaign once and it did not work. Stop it, right? Like the data tells us again that we have to touch people, 16 plus times to get their attention. So when you're doing outbound, it's just like any other thing. The volume has to be fairly significant, right? And then we have to reach out to people more than once to get their attention. To me, and this is just my philosophy, and obviously this is what I do for a living, but if you are only willing to reach out to me once to try to engage me and to build a relationship in any capacity, then it really wasn't that important to you to build a relationship. Think about this, and we talk about this a lot at the Connection Agency when we think of sales like dating, right? Which is just a fun, funny thing to talk about. But when you think of sales like dating, if you were interested in someone and you just sent them one text message and that was it, right? And they happened to be busy that day, or maybe it was a holiday, or maybe their kid was sick, or maybe they, were presenting on a really big project that day. I don't know, right? All the billions of things that this person might be doing. But my point in telling you that is, then you just walk away. You're not going to pursue that person in any way, shape, or form, even though you really like them. Well, I sent them one text message and they didn't get back to me. And again, I'm not proposing stalker status, right? That's not any better either. But the truth of the matter is, if you were genuinely interested in someone, you would pursue them in some capacity. You would make them feel important. You would make them feel cared for, right? So when we look at prospecting, when we look at outbound, for us, it's our way of making people feel seen, heard, and understood. And again, I do understand that there's a fine line, right? Fine line between stalking and being persistent, right? But I just think that is such an important part of the conversation, is making sure, again, that we're reaching enough people, because that's the thing too. People will tell me, well, I messaged 100 people. Well, again, when we're expecting a 20% response rate, you message 100 people, you're getting into conversation with 20 of them. It's possible that only 8 or 9 of them are actually qualified anyway. And then how many of them are actually in that buying cycle where they're ready to make a buying decision, right? So again, we have to make sure that it is a large enough reach, and then we have to make sure that we are touching them often enough to create that familiarity. That's what reach and frequency is about. So again, social media content, email content, outreach, all of these things fall under the same umbrella. If you're over on Instagram, if you're over on TikTok, if you're over on, wherever you hang out is perfectly fine. But you have to ask yourself, is my audience large enough, right? Is our audience large enough, knowing that at any point in time, it's very likely that less than 5% of your audience is actively searching for a solution. So this is an important thing too. And I want to talk about this when we talk about reach, because it doesn't mean that only 5% of your audience is ever going to buy from you. I just want to clarify that. When we talk about numbers, then this 3 to 5% are actively in the market. The reason that we continue to market is because who that is may change tomorrow. So to use small numbers, right? Say we have 100 people in our audience. It's possible that only 3 to 5 are actually looking for what you do right now. It doesn't mean that those other 95 people are not great fit clients or great fit prospects. They're just maybe not in a buying cycle, which is another reason why frequency is so important. And it's another reason why I throw a lot of rocks at things like launches, challenges, and webinars, because launches, challenges, and webinars are your buying cycle, right? I want you to buy in my buying cycle. People don't buy in your buying cycle. They buy in their own damn buying cycle, which is why, again, the frequency thing comes up. Because if you're not marketing to them when they're in their buying cycle, then, you're not going to have the opportunity, right? So when we think of, again, reach and frequency, it's, are we actively showing up consistently enough? Because again, only 3 to 5% are going to actively be buying. So then we need to think of, well, how big does our audience need to be? How big does our audience need to be to actually help us hit our sales goals? So I've given you a lot of data. I've given you a lot of information. I feel like this is a little dense for such a short podcast, but I want to just be really clear about this, because I think that this is somewhat of the internet guru coaching, what's the word I'm looking for? Epidemic, is that the right word? Where it's just this idea that I should just be able to show up on social media a couple of times a week and say what I need to say, and clients are just going to come flooding in, and I'm just going to wait for them to come to me, and it's going to be so easy, and I could just run my conversion events every 6 to 8 weeks, or I can run my biweekly webinar, or whatever it is, and it's just all going to work out. And, at some point in time in your business, my friend, it absolutely will work out once you have a large enough audience for it to work out, right? So you have to ask yourself, where am I in my business building journey? Where am I in my audience building journey? And then what is my frequency to get in front of these people to actually make them buy, right? And again, I don't say this to brag or be arrogant, but the number of people, when I connect with them and I engage with them, they're like, oh my God, I see you everywhere. They can repeat back to me things that I have said on social media. And I also want to be mindful that these are not people that are actively necessarily engaging with my content, right? So this isn't like the person who comments on everything I put out there. These are people who I've literally never spoken to before, that have just been watching, right? They've just been watching and engaging and reading, and I didn't even know it, right? But I tell you this because most people get frustrated with the lack of results. And again, it comes down to, is your audience large enough and are you talking to them? And most people don't have the stick-to-itiveness to just keep showing up despite not seeing results. But what's really powerful about all of this is the compound effect of this, right? So, in the beginning, you start from zero. And then you gain a little bit of momentum and a little bit more momentum, more momentum, more momentum. The momentum is building on top of one another. And so eventually you will get to a tipping point where, yes, every time you post on social media, people are reaching out to you, right? Every time you run a launch or a challenge, people are buying because they're anticipating that buying cycle, right? So that's why launches and challenges work so well, is because people have learned to watch and say, okay, well, I know that so-and-so is in launch, and so I'm ready to buy. But that comes from this building momentum and this compound effect of the activity that we do. We unfortunately live in a society where we have been taught and trained and programmed to believe that I should be able to show up for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, make my millions and go home. And you and I both know that that's not realistic. And it wasn't realistic when I was selling radio advertising, 20 years ago. How many years ago was that? 2005. So 18 years ago, right? Didn't happen then either. And what was interesting is at that time, it was just a very common conversation, right? Is that we were like, no, if you need results in the next 90 days, radio advertising is not for you. We were extremely candid about that. And again, 18 years ago, business looked very different. But unfortunately, nobody wants to be honest enough with you on the internet to tell you that if you pay me, and even if you pay me a premium, I still very likely am not going to be able to get you results immediately. And here's why. Because again, this compound effect of every single day, think of it when it comes to diet and exercise, right? Beginning, we're like, oh, it's just a short run here or a short run there or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're able to run 5 miles and you're able to run 10 miles. But on day 1, you couldn't run more than 1 mile, right? But then by day 90, you can easily cruise through 10 if you do the training. If you show up and you follow the training plan and you do it consistently enough, you're going to get a result. Sales and marketing is the exact same thing, right? The biggest nuance to all of this is your messaging, right? Because I do think that there are some people who unfortunately are showing up, and I don't know if this is you, but are showing up in the world, and they are showing up consistently, but their messaging isn't compelling enough. It's very vanilla. It's very bland. It sounds like everybody else. They're not saying the things that they want to say. And that's an entire other podcast. I probably created some podcasts about this, but today is really just about the brass tacks activities of reach and frequency, audience building, and getting in front of them often enough. So really take some time to evaluate how large is my audience, right? What are my audience building activities that I'm doing every single day? And then what is the frequency of which I'm showing up, and where can I turn that frequency up so that people can see me more often, create more familiarity. So then when I do make offers, people want to buy from me. Because that's a challenge. If you don't show up frequently enough and then you're making offers, you don't have any familiarity, right? You don't have any, what's the word, social currency, right? There's I don't know who this random stranger on the internet is who's making offers. Whereas if they've been reading every single thing you've posted for the past month and then you make an offer, they're going to be way more likely to buy. So look at what is the reach? What is my audience growth strategy? What is my frequency? What is my medium? And then really look at, am I reaching enough people, and am I reaching them frequently enough to compel them into action? Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to Content and Conversations. If this was helpful for you, I would love if you would follow along, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. And we'll see you next week.